We again are going to build up on some of the key themes that have been highlighted by various speakers this morning. And of course, reflecting on some of the nuances that have been shaped, right? We've built up the conversation that the partnership is there, the capital is certainly there. We are working in an effort to build up camaraderie and ensure that we heighten the level of inclusivity when it comes to women entrepreneurship. We've also understood that there's a heightened level of preparedness that is certainly required from female business owners to come on board and support entrepreneurship, right? And making sure that as you approach the financiers, that you yourself are also adequately prepared for the conversations you're going to have with them. But there's a very important aspect that we also need to build up on, the sustainability. It's one thing to have all your CIPC documentation in order, all the regulatory controls taken care of, access to all the money in the world that you can get your hands on, but how does this adequately speak to making sure that your business is sustainable in terms of growth? And that's what we want to do. Improving profitability, improving sustainability, so that at some point when you decide that you're no longer actively involved in the business, it can continue without your active involvement and participation, and rather participate in a form of wealth creation for future generations in your family or further advancement within the communities that you serve. So again, I'm going to introduce our panelists who will be joining me up on stage. Again, you're more than welcome to ask any questions that you might have, and we are likely going to engage you very robustly, of course, in terms of the questions that you might ask and seek your responses there too. This panel discussion is an exciting one because we speak to the financiers who are on the ground, who actually look for that partnership that you seek by fully understanding what is it you need, how do you need it, how do we unpack it, and someone who does that on a daily basis, primarily focusing on the area of Pretoria under Business Partners, is Megan Dedekind, who joins us as an area manager at Business Partners to give us some insight into that conversation. She won't be alone on this particular panel discussion. She's joined by someone who has been a formidable contributor to the overall understanding of capital markets in South Africa and the continent. More than that, she's also fast-tracked the development of SME development within the JSE, making sure that even though we talk about IPOs and initial public offerings and big businesses with billions of rands, that those partnerships are able to be forged between entrepreneurs, big business owners, and capital markets to fully propel your growth going forward. Coupled with that, she's also spearheaded key conversations on how to reduce red tape. A key word that frustrates many entrepreneurs as to how we should adequately manage that. That's Ms. Cleola, Kunene, Head of SME Development at the JSE. And as mentioned previously, we also need to ensure that as we focus on building businesses and making them sustainable, you can't speak about sustainability without referencing ESG. How what you do impacts your environment, how it has a social impact and the people and communities that you work in, and most of all, which remains critical at any stage of business growth, is adequate governance. How is it that we prioritize the sustainable development goals and make sure that our entrepreneurs are aligned to some of these themes? We will be joined by Joan, Manda, Senior SDG Investment Advisor for UN Development Program, who will give us some insight into that conversation. And it wouldn't be a conversation with entrepreneurs if we didn't have an entrepreneur on stage. Yes, we're going to hear from one who has done exactly that. Started a phenomenal organization, changing access to education, and of course, primarily when it comes to private pre-primary and primary education, unlocking opportunities that exist within that realm. Again, speaking to the social change and development we require, working together with her family, husband included, so we do need our gents to make sure that we're able to propel the growth going forward, and more so is even present here today with her daughter, which I think is very important. It reminds us that as we are here looking to be shapeshifters, remember that fundamentally there needs to be a generational change to make sure that we don't have the same conversation 20, 30, or 40 years from now. That will be Ms. Erika, owner of Fundamental Faculty, who will be joining us on the panel today. Ladies and gentlemen, please warmly give all my panelists a warm round of applause as they make their way up to the stage. Fantastic. As they do come up, I'm going to kindly request just one more microphone just to ensure that either side of the panelists will be able to ventilate some of the concerns that we'll be addressing today and conversations at hand. Happy for you to allocate yourselves anyway. Fantastic. Thank you so much, ladies, for making time to join us on this panel discussion, which promises to be very phenomenal, right? Especially in light of the insight that will be shared, key themes that will be discussed, and how best we can build sustainable businesses by taking into account all these various themes that we've fundamentally unlocked throughout the course of the day. We've got the capital, the business is booming, perhaps it's booming a bit too quickly for us to actually adequately manage, but these are some of the consequences that we will fully discuss. And perhaps I'll start to my left-hand side, right? Just to get some clarity on, of course, the on-the-ground activity that typically happens to forge and foster this partnership that does take place. Listening to both the JSC and, of course, a representative of business partners. Please hold on this too. Thank you so much. We'll come to you in a moment to understand how it is that as organizations, they formulate those partnerships and, most importantly, adequately address the opportunities that need to be sought on the ground. Let me start with yourself. We had a key question that came up earlier as to how does business partners form a partnership with entrepreneurs who are essentially the enablers and the founding partners of these organizations and institutions. And maybe let's start there as we pick up and expand on how that initial meeting fundamentally does need to derive some level of sustainable growth within the business.
Of course, I appreciate the question, Gugu, and to the audience member who did actually pose the question. And yeah, again, it's not necessarily the easiest question to always answer, and I think it really comes down to you as the SME or you as the business owner, the entrepreneur, really understanding your business and what your actual financial need is, okay? Because like the previous panel did actually highlight, there is money, there is actually finance available, but we need to understand who those financiers are and the alternative forms of finance that's there. So we highlighted SAFCA, venture capital, private equity, banks, alternative funders like business partners, crowdfunding, creditors. There are so many forms of funding. Cash flow funders, there's millions of them these days. But you need to understand what it is that you need so that you can match yourself to the criteria and the requirements of the correct financier. Because I think quite often there's so much frustration that comes through, it got declined. It got declined. But why did it get declined? Yes. Potentially you were not at the right funder and you were not knocking on the right door. Yeah. So you need to understand, for instance, if you want to partner with me, you need to understand what my criteria are. And it's obviously my job to make you aware of what those items are and how I can help you become successful at business partners. And yeah, it's ultimately understanding that and the conversation around that so that I can eventually bring you on board and partner with you.
Definitely. Maybe just keep with you again, Megan. Typically, I can imagine there are a number of entrepreneurs whom you've interacted with who come from the Pretoria region where you are active on the ground and speak to them. And what you've fundamentally done as business partners is hold their hand, guide them in terms of making sure they access the right funding. You're aware of the growth stage within which they're at and where it is that you're looking to take them going forward in terms of scalability. Share some experiences and examples with us to make it practical to understand typically the type of clients that you've interacted with, their growth at the time, and how you've propelled their experience going forward through initiatives and incentives and partnerships that are established with business partners.
I appreciate that one. That's something that I'm very passionate about. Again, I think, and we've already discussed it, two common problems that are cited by entrepreneurs is ultimately access to finance, and the second one is access to information, support services, and technical assistance.
Yes.
So for me now, my focus is now more going to be on the technical assistance side. And I think, just by way of example, just to explain more what that means is if you are an entrepreneur, say for instance, you manufacture this microphone, for instance, you understand your manufacturing process, you understand the components that go into this thing, you understand where your supply or who your suppliers are, who your clients are. But we don't necessarily understand or know what is my profit margin on this income stream? How can I diversify this income stream? How can I make more money? How can I improve my process flow to make my business more efficient? How can I save that money? How can I improve upon my business? And then how can I potentially use technology to gain access to markets. How can I do that? How can I diversify my market? And all of that is done via support and technical assistance.
Gotcha.
And perhaps I've been given a blessing of one of my clients over there, Amelia, if it's okay that I can share your story with everybody.
Amelia, please stand up so that we can see you and we know where to find you. Fantastic. Thanks, Amelia.
Thank you, Amelia. This is just an example. So just as part of our solution for technical assistance. So again, let's be honest, access to all of these fantastic things to help us cost money, okay? If you want to bring in a business strategist into your business, he's going to cost you 100,000 Rand a month more, maybe. Now, where on earth am I going to get this money? So what Business Partners has created is our Technical Assistance Fund. It's essentially a zero interest fund, so it doesn't cost you anything. There's no fees, there's no raising fees, there's no cost attached to it.
That's
essentially
important.
It's massive. You know, so if you're going to bring a mentor on board, a business strategist, and he's going to cost you, let's say, 500,000 Rand, instead of taking 500,000 Rand out of your business cash flow, if you have it, or just foregoing the opportunity because you can't afford it, we take that 500,000 Rand, divide it by 60 because it's repayable over 5 years, make your repayment that big, and then suddenly unlock so much potential in your business through this fund. I cannot tell you the impact that this money and this fund has had on our businesses. And like I said, referring to Amelia and Amelia's story, and I really appreciate you letting me share this story, Amelia, because it is a family story, it's a family business, and it's not been an easy road, let's say it like that. But if I can just give everybody a little bit of background on this business. So Amelia manufactures peanut butter. She's got the most wonderful business in the heart of Centurion in Sunderland Ridge. And it was during COVID, I forget which year it was, 2021, somewhere around then. We were still working under lockdown conditions. Everything was remote working. And Amelia and them, her business had cash flow problems, okay? So the previous year, it was their roaster, I believe, that had broken down, and they had to outsource the roasting of their peanuts, which dramatically reduced their profit margins in their business. So they lost a lot of cash flow. And then immediately after that came COVID. My business is closed. I can't operate. And they were closed for, again, I can't remember how many months before they got this essential services provider certificate. Anyway, so they had major cash flow problems in the industry. So they came to us for financial assistance to assist them with a working capital injection. Yeah. Obviously did the initial checks and everything. We were happy with this business. We want to help them with the money. So we were busy with the due diligence. And again, to reiterate, this business was run by Amelia and her brother and her sister. So it's a family business. It's 3 siblings that were running the business. And because it was during COVID, probably the worst of the worst things, Amelia, could have happened. And that's why I say this is an emotional story, where Amelia lost her brother and her sister to COVID. It was I cannot imagine what that must have felt like, and a very, 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 very difficult time for Amelia and the business. Our funding was approved, so we did have the funding in place to actually assist Amelia with the business and to assist with the cash flow gap. But of course, we were now sitting with a very difficult situation that 2 of the primary members of the business are no longer there. And we're sitting with, how can I say, change management problems and things like that that we had to address. So, yeah, Amelia, I had a couple of meetings with you, and then we said, okay, let's do this. And that's when we decided, okay, we're bringing in our change management specialists, we're bringing turnaround specialists in, business strategists, and yeah, Amelia, you would be able to say it or describe it better than me. I think with a hell of a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. Amelia, I think, really has changed that business around. I think the business model has almost changed. Your profit margins have changed. The business has gone from what was substantially loss-making initially when you came to us to profitable.
Sure.
And that was all supported via technical assistance.
100%.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Megan. And again, Amelia, our condolences for your loss, but I can imagine that it's a beautiful legacy to keep going, given that you've rebuilt and reshaped the business through the technical support that you've had. And this is also important because you're touching on a very important aspect that is typically not discussed, not even just for male entrepreneurs, but female entrepreneurs, is the psychological pressure and the burden that so many of us carry in terms of just life and still balancing being an entrepreneur. It is something that I do want us to touch on at some point during the duration of the panel discussion. But as we come to you, Cleola, I can imagine that you often are met with quite a bit of a surprise by those who interact with you. And you think, hold on, the JSE helping SMEs? How so? You're looking for companies with billions of rands that are looking for pension funds to invest in them, but yet there's a concerted effort to make sure that we don't leave out the engine room of South Africa's economy, essentially, which does speak to SME development. Talk to us about the growth, the change, and the evolution of the program since its inception, and most importantly, some of the progress that has been made through the continent's largest capital markets, essentially.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Well, let me start by saying congratulations to everyone here. Happy International Women's Day, and congrats on spending your day with intent, right? It's very important for us to have these conversations. So, you know, being here means that, especially if you're an entrepreneur, that you are being intentional about being accountable, you know, in terms of your business's journey. And accountability is the key word. Every corporate, every business, not just every corporate, every business in South Africa, whether small or big, is accountable to this country because we benefit from this country, right? And as the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the largest exchange in Africa, 19th largest exchange in the world, we fundamentally understand that accountability and the accountability to not just large enterprises or to the capital markets or to our shareholders or employees, but to sustainably help support the growth of this economy. If you look at the National Development Plan goals, SMEs are top, saying that we expect that 90% of job creation is going to come from SMEs. How is that possible in the current economic situation? So when you are realistic about where you're at and the base that you're operating from, you have to be realistic about the role that you have to play and give more, do more than what is your mandate, right? So that is where we've come from to say, what can we do as the JSE that is outside of our scope? And the solutions that we're running is not ESD, it really is economic development focused, right? And the proof is in the pudding in terms of the work that we've done, working with the various ecosystem players. Business Partners is a collaborative partner with us. SIFA is here, SAFCA. We understand that also it's not something that you can do alone because the entire value chain needs to work together. We need to collaborate together. And so the role that we're playing in terms of supporting SMEs, especially medium-sized enterprises, is about understanding that the next stage of growth is not going to happen if we don't all play our role.
100%. And maybe give us more details into that particular circle of collaborative effort. What nuances exist there? Practical examples as to how you've assisted entrepreneurs and really shifted the radar in terms of that business's growth and development.
So we've got a few solutions, and I'll start with the acceleration solution, which is something that we started a few years ago. If you look at our companies, we've got about 2 million SMEs, and only about 25,000 of those are medium-sized enterprises, even less large enterprises. And a significant number of the medium-sized enterprises kind of stay stuck there, right? And we're not seeing sufficient support for those enterprises to become large enterprises. South African entrepreneurs and businesses are highly competitive, and you just have to look at the companies that have managed to make it to understand how competitive they are. I mean, if you go to other countries, nobody knows that Nando's started here in the South, right? Yep. They think Nando's started in the UK. Clickatel, etc. There's so many great stories. However, what we've seen happen is that a lot of these companies reach a certain stage and then leave our shores because there isn't acceleration support for these companies. And so we leaned into specifically that space. We believe there's a lot of incubation and technical assistance that is available. However, acceleration, which is pivoting your business, which is about commercial partnerships and specifically international expansion and access to funding and different sources of funding, isn't necessarily available for those types of companies. So we started an acceleration solution, and that's been running for a number of years now, with significant success, varying degrees of success. But what we have seen are companies that have successfully expanded, especially into new markets. And in fact, we have some of the companies where their international businesses are now, or the business that they've expanded internationally is now bigger in terms of revenue than the local business, right? So if you do provide that kind of support, we see that we are highly competitive, but we do need acceleration support. Secondly, we've worked with our ecosystem to provide capital readiness. There's a very low approval rate for SMEs that want access to funding. The capital readiness is both a solution in terms of both training that we've provided, but also working with our ecosystem to understand what their mandates are and ensuring that we facilitate and support getting the right type of companies to them.
Got you.
And then we've partnered with government, etc., to do capital matching as well. Last year, we did capital matching in the Western Cape for 100 companies, and we had a 66% success rate, right, at the first try. And it's not because we did anything like some secret sauce, but we worked with the ecosystem and we worked with the SMEs for a few months to make sure that that capital readiness is so succinct and that matching is so succinct. And just to give context to that 66%, it may not seem a lot, but if you think on consideration in terms of South Africa, the average approval rate is 37%. It's a double-digit change from what we see on average. So that is when you actually lean in and really work with the ecosystem. In addition, we've also done a lot of work in terms of red tape reduction.
Yes.
And of course, strategic partnerships, both locally and internationally. Also trying to look at what we can do to source more funder funds for the funding space in South Africa.
100%. And I like how this does build on to the themes that we did hear earlier on from our panelists from SAVCA, Tshepiso, who had highlighted that you need to identify the right funds. And it was complementing a question that you had around which funds to actually look for in terms of support. So here it's literally almost a speed dating opportunity to say, hold on, here's a perfect match, continue on with this particular partnership. You mentioned red tape, and I do want us to come back to it in just a moment. But before we do that, we also need to expand on some of the opportunities that have been highlighted in terms of how South African businesses need to be relevant to the local environment, but we still need to be globally competitive. Otherwise, the growth that we're seeking through business partners, the JSE, and many of our other funders here will not be sustainable, because perhaps there might be boxes that we're not ticking, but efforts that we're also not undertaking effectively on a global scale. And this is where sustainability comes in. Every other week, we read about big companies in the papers, perhaps how they might have flouted governance controls, how they're trying to prioritize environmental sustainability, and of course, making sure that from a social point of view, they contribute to jobs. And if you're thinking, if big business can be held accountable at that level, what does that mean for you and I as entrepreneurs in the room? How does it impact the level of funding and support that you can also gain, and even the networks that you're looking to leverage, especially with big businesses when your views or perhaps partnerships might not be aligned in terms of sustainability? Joan, this is where you come in. It's a significant passion point for you when it comes to organizations, not only in South Africa, but across the continent and the world over. Help us contextualize. When we're starting a business, typically we think, I've got a product, I've got a service, I'm trying to match and improve my profit margins, I need access to markets. How is it that we as entrepreneurs also need to start thinking, hold on, what is my business doing from a sustainability point of view that ties into the financing I need or ties into the partnerships that I'd like to forge?
Thank you so much, Gugu. And it's a real pleasure being here and part of this august panel. And most of my days are spent trying to convince governments to put in place the right kind of frameworks, regulations that would demand that businesses, financiers actually speak about sustainability and speak about impact. And the JSE actually has one of the best sustainability frameworks on the continent, actually. And I also spend a lot of my time working with climate change experts, trying to talk about sustainability, green development, green economy. And in all of those cases, I'm sitting with a bunch of men. And so it's a real pleasure being here amongst a group of women like yourselves. It just feels like home, and I'm really glad that we're having this kind of conversation.
Fantastic.
What I want to say is that stories matter. And I think, the way we started the panel actually just really demonstrated that. And even Mambongi, when she was talking about sustainability and telling the right story when you're talking to your bank, it matters. It's what actually moves people to action. And if you get your story right and you've got the right information and the right metrics in your story, that really positions you very, very strongly to interact as a partner, to interact as somebody who can really step up to the plate and say the reason why your business counts and why other people should put their money in your business. So a lot of my time is trying to identify the metrics that make sense. And I think as the UN, we have the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sure you've all heard about that. And everybody goes, in the private sector, everyone goes, yeah. It's a public sector story. Let them deal with it. But when COVID hit, and we had a health crisis, that everybody was thinking, wait a minute, the government should be doing something about this. But in the second, third, fourth quarter of this crisis, it began to hit our pockets, it caused our businesses to shut down, and we began to understand that some of the development goals that we are aiming for are so interconnected, everybody needs to be playing in this space. And businesses started to come alongside governments and saying, wait a minute, we understand this is a health crisis, and usually the public sector should cover it, but we as businesses can come alongside and we can do this faster, we can do it more efficiently, we can be creative in how we deliver basic health services. That's the difference. And when we're talking sustainability, I think the whole of the private sector began to wake up to the fact that we might tick little boxes on ESG, environment, social, governance, whatever. But if we don't take this seriously, it actually will hit my bottom line. Now, I need to be running my business today with tomorrow in mind.
100%.
And that's what's so critical about the impact measurement and management. And that's what sustainability is all about. Understanding your story, what will make that story a legacy for life and beyond, and what metrics you should be measuring to inform the way you design your business to make it a lot more profitable. And financiers are waking up to this. And they are now saying, we want impact measurement. We want, I loved Chepiso, who said, they're impact investors. They used to be a niche set of investors. Now everybody must be talking. In fact, as the UN, we would like all investment to be impact investment.
100%.
Because it all has a bearing on health, education, all of the 16 SDGs that we talk about. So it's really critical. And why is IMM critical? Accountability, disclosures, transparency. It's also important because a lot of people make a lot of claims. Oh yeah, we're also helping.
Greenwashing.
Yes, I was going to get there to greenwashing or impact washing as we're calling it now. We're also making a contribution, but how much? How often? How effective is it? This is really critical. And I think also just in terms of redefining success. We used to think of business as, I'm making money. No, I must make money and do good at the same time. And I think that's critical.
Exactly.
So that's what we're looking at.
Profit with purpose. I want to stay with you for a moment.
Purpose, yes.
Profit with purpose, and really
Absolutely.
underscoring that shared value model, right, where you ensure that you
100%.
journey along with all stakeholder groups. I do want to challenge you, though, because I can imagine for many of us as entrepreneurs, are you focused on sustainability right now in your organizations? Yes, no, maybe? Yes, I'm hearing a lot of yes. That's refreshing, and some hands up as well. And I think this is something then that should be underscored, because typically we think, oh no, it affects the big oil and energy producers, the coal mining houses, the companies perhaps who might be in freight and logistics and the emissions that they cause to the environment. But empower us as entrepreneurs. And I know that this might be tricky because we all operate in very different fields, but how do we prioritize sustainability, especially for SMEs? And essentially identifying the target or sustainability goals that we can implement within our businesses.
I think as SMEs, you're the experts of working out your environment, seeing a problem and coming up with a business solution for it. So you're already halfway there, right? And often we get questions around, well, I'm an SME, I'm too small, I can't afford to do all of this impact stuff. But actually you're doing a lot of it even as you're doing your business. KYC, knowing your clients, understanding, am I serving women, am I serving men, which women, what type, what's the demographic, what am I really aiming for, what's my client looking like? That's all part of it. The SDGs, which again, I know people gloss over when I mention them, but they actually have an outline of different indicators that you can start to look at around education. Are we talking, primary? Are we talking secondary? Are we talking? If you start just measuring what you are doing, you'll manage your businesses a lot better, and you'll already start having the data that will not only inform your business management practices, but will also speak to the impact metrics that you're looking for. Most businesses measure things like jobs, which is great, but jobs for whom? And and are we talking short-term, long-term? It'll start to answer some of the questions that financiers are also asking you as well. How much water do you use in your business? Could you be more efficient with that use of water? Because there's overall goals around how we should conserve water, because climate change is a real threat. It's a real thing.
Definitely. And we
So
see
we
it
agree.
with the weather patterns. We definitely
Yes,
do.
and we're seeing it, How much electricity am I using? And what type of electricity am I using? Is it off the grid? Can I do some solar? How do I manage this so that I am preparing myself for a business of the future? So there's a whole range of metrics that are specifically actually informative for your own business. It's not that we're trying to ask you to measure, poverty across the country. Leave that to government, that's fine. But you as a business person, you need data and information that can really tell your story well. And then when you walk up to business partners and others, you've got a story that is compelling.
100%. Yeah. I'm so glad that you highlight this, because within telling that story, this is where we're going to shift to now by listening to Erika's story and experience. Fundamentally, all of us have gone through an education system of some sort. And we should not ignore that not only is it capital invested, but it's the skills, the learnings, the lessons that are developed by educators that are imparted on us as students, which essentially contribute to the workforce that we are here today, being economically active and leaders and captains of certain industries. And when you think about an early childhood development center, perhaps for many of us it's a center that we take for granted the level of effort, contribution, and support that is required not only to take care of children, but to educate them efficiently, providing a level of equal education, providing a safe environment for people to grow, and of course, ensuring that there is a heightened level of ongoing knowledge and investment that goes to them. Erika's story, and I quickly had to double check the SDG goals to see how it fits in, touches on SDG goal number 5 in terms of gender equality, SDG 6 on quality education, SDG 10 on reducing inequality. So even as you're sitting and you might think, hold on, I don't tick the boxes when it comes to sustainability or SDGs, all you have to do is to focus on the area and space you're in and highlight where there might be linkages. Erika, but you have a beautiful story to tell. And I'm glad that you're here today to actually fully express just the growth that you've witnessed, the experience in the field that you have, and most importantly, how it's been catapulted to a new level of sustainability, which is what we're underscoring through your partnership with business partners. So tell us more.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Am I audible there?
Loud and clear.
So thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to share my amazing story. I have a roller coaster story which started off as a really, really small business. And one thing I want to say this morning is I probably represent the older generation of people sitting here.
Far from it.
And
Young at heart.
Young at heart. And I think for us, it's more about transferring knowledge. So you go through phases in your life, and you get to the phase where cars are important, where jewelry is important, where you want that piece of jewelry for the investment, you know, those parts of your life. And then you get to a stage in your life where you know that you have to make something sustainable, so you start transferring knowledge to other people. And you employ people, and this is very important, you employ people that have got potential, because you need to transfer that so that it can carry on to the next generation. So my story involves, you need, girls, one person who believes in your dream. And that one person will turn to 2 people and turn to 3 people. My voice out there is saying to you, stop listening to the voices. Stop listening to the negative voices. The people who say to you, oh no, this is not going to work. This is not going to realize. So we started with, well, I have a lot of experience in education. So I taught for about 16 years, after which I had my own practice for about 15 years, and I was into remedial education, teaching children who couldn't cope. Until one day my husband said to me, you know what, I've done everything that I wanted to in life, you've supported me, so what do you really want? And that is my message. You need to grow. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody in life has a purpose. You have to focus on your purpose and your passion. And my answer was, you know what, I've always wanted a private school. And that is where I was. And so at a very ripe age, we started on the journey. I want to also tell you that this journey is a lonely journey if you haven't got people to support you. So we started off as a preschool, taking in babies of 6 weeks, as young as 6 weeks, with 5 children and 3 staff members. So you can imagine, they cost money. Nobody's interested in you because you're so tiny, you cannot even approach people like business partners because you are really tiny and you are only a drop in the ocean.
Sure.
So what happened was we got on board, and eventually, you know, I was doing 2 jobs like a lot of you girls are doing out there. So to sustain this project of mine, I was working in my practice, working in this project to grow it. It was quite a story. And eventually we got to the point after a year when my husband said, you know what, I believe in this dream and it's going to work. We had grown phenomenally in that first year. I think in my first year we went up to 120 learners from a 5-learner operation. And and he gave up his business. He was boots and all into the new venture. Needless to say, we are now 5 years down the line, and we now have a preschool, a primary school, and a high school.
Erika?
So it's really, really cool. We've had huge blessings. It's been really hard work, and I want to tell you out there, it's hard work. Nothing comes for nothing.
Give us the juice, because that's what we want to hear, how you made it from that level to this scale and making it sustainable. At least
I'm going to
3
talk
key
about
lessons.
the sustainability in a minute.
Sure.
I just want to quickly talk about business partners' role in our business. So once we had realized that, listen, hubbies, that we're not going to be able to sustain this whole project because we needed constant money for buildings, because the buildings had to grow. The equipment that we had to grow. We had to have spaces for kids. We approached business partners. And I must honestly say, at that stage of the game, and no disrespect to Ma'am Bongi over there, the banks were not interested in our story. We had grown, it was a year later, banks were really not interested in our story. And we ventured into different investment companies. And I also want to tell you there's a very big danger in doing that. So we had put it out there and said, listen, we're looking for an investor, and we got numerous people who wanted to invest in this growing educational field. The problem being is it would be fine and they would be really enthusiastic, and when we got down to the actual agreement, it would look like it was a hostile takeover of your business. And this was the problem we were facing, because it was a question of, well, they'd put more money into your business, but they'd claim more shares. So the shareholders' agreements were always where we got stuck. Needless to say, this is how the journey worked. We were driving in a car one day, and Business Partners advert came over the radio. Now, that's how we were connected with Business Partners. Yes. And we started our road with Business Partners. I think they understood the bigger picture. I think there were not the restrictions with them that there were with banks at that stage of the game. So we were very fortunate in the fact that they shared in the vision and the growth. They shared common goals that we were looking at. So education, empowerment, sustainability. It was also for them about growth. It was about growth and how many other people you could impact in your area.
100%.
So that was amazing. So we started our journey with them, a nerve-wracking journey, because in the beginning they did have a look and see if I was still sane at my age, you know, when they were doing due diligence. But anyway, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and the arms open approach and the going forward was amazing. So that was the beginning of our journey. So we had taken our first loan, and we 5 years later, after that, of course, there came a second loan, and we thought, okay, and for their information, there might be a third one or in the pipeline for a new sports development.
Application already.
Yes, I am. For their information, there might be another one. But yes, so we now sustain from a person who's coming from a viewpoint from I was comfortable in my own practice. It was wonderful. I looked after myself. My family was comfortable. No stress. Just see these kids and we can do life like this.
Yeah.
So from a person who was only looking at putting food on the table for one family, we moved to sustaining 155 families. And that was my real amazing journey. So now when we pay over salaries, it's like, oh gosh, you know, this kind of takes quite a while, but it is the most exhilarating feeling to know that people are empowered within your company and you are taking it forth from there. And I think that was that at this stage of the game. I'm not so much. I love the kids. I love them giving me hugs all day. I love that part of it, but my passion at the moment is growth with my fellow educators and empowering them to write their stories. I think that's 100%. Where my growth is now.
Erika, phenomenal story, and I do want to stay with you for a moment, but I think this does help us recognize that the challenges that many of you as entrepreneurs face are faced by others in terms of capital, not finding the right capital, sourcing the right relationships and partnerships, and the challenges that might be experienced across the way, but the solutions are there. Again, it's for you to identify the right partners for you along that journey, that sustainability can still be found through the initiatives and the environment that you're actually in, and even the operations that you identify, and that does speak to the kind of capital and networks that you're able to access. But Erika, I want to stay with you for a moment because there's something that you highlighted here. We will be sitting back and thinking, you grew in that manner in 5 years. Boy, yours is a unicorn within this particular story. But there's also something that you've cautioned us against. Whilst growth is what we want, sustainability is what we seek, sometimes you can grow too fast, too quickly, and not have the necessary capacity to manage that growth. Talk to us about your experience in that regard, in terms of growing too quickly and having to quickly source the necessary resources to support that growth.
So I think in the beginning that was a bit of a challenge for us because sometimes people who finance you are not necessarily in tune with the time that you have to access this money. You know, so you have to have it by yesterday. And because we are very out-of-the-box thinkers, both myself and my husband, you're already on to the next project and the next project. So it is difficult when you're growing so fast. And that's why it is so important to put people in place that you can empower to take over certain sections. Business is not about holding everything for yourself. Business is about empowering the next person to be able to, and trusting the next person and saying, listen, you can run with this and you're okay with running with this. And by saying that, if they do a good job, the most important thing is reward. Acknowledge what those people can do in your business and reward them for what they are doing. And that I think is very important.
100%.
Business partners played a key role there because they were able to finance our buildings. And that created a lot of easy cash flow for us to refocus the attention.
Gotcha.
But for example, with the growth of your personnel, I had a lady that started with me as a cleaner. She now successfully runs 3 of our canteens that run within the business. And it's amazing. It's just awesome.
Very intriguing. I do want us to gauge the floor if there are any questions, because there are certain themes I do want us to come back to, specifically on red tape, to find out what challenges still remain. But despite the fact that we know policy and regulation doesn't change overnight, there are ways to navigate the environment despite those pressure points. And as you talk about passing on the baton, I've also been intrigued that in the room there's a lot of family-owned businesses run by females. And as you said, you're building a legacy here. At some point, you need to pass on the baton and trust that dynamic. And given that there's different generations involved, perhaps baby boomers might not be so keen to partner with Gen Zs if they aren't aligned. And how do we improve on that particular partnership? So I do want that to be part of the takeaway points that we can share with the audience. But for the moment, I've hogged the panel for too long. I'm keen to see if there's any questions from the floor, just to build up on the theme of sustainability when it comes to building a business, fast-tracking that growth, but making sure that you're capacitated for that growth efficiently. How sustainability also plays a key role, and understanding how we as women also contribute significantly to the uniqueness in terms of our leadership style and strategic thinking that we can offer. Any questions from the floor? We have one hand at the back. We're happy to take 2 more, just in the interest of time, and take them back to back. Oh, the lady behind the pillar. Oh, you'll have to pardon me. Perfect, your hand has been noted. So you at the back, the lady behind the pillar. Anyone else? I've been told I have been not, there we go, we've got a hand from this side. I was told that I wasn't distributing the questions equally, so I'm hoping that that does cover us for a bit. Please do stand up, ma'am, just to ensure that we can see you. Introduce yourself and kindly keep your question to the point. Oh, Palisa, I don't think we can hear you clearly yet. I did hear your name, but that's just because I'm sharp. Let's try again.
Hi, yes.
There we go.
My name is Palisa. I'm from Excellence Business Consulting. In terms of growth, I would like to learn how partnerships have helped with accelerating the growth that people have seen in their businesses. Thank you.
Perfect. Is it directed to anyone specifically or just a broad question? 100%. So we'll talk about growth and how partnership has been able to accelerate growth. You'll pardon me, ma'am, I can't see you behind the pillar, but if you could raise your hand for the microphone to get to you. There we go.
Thank you for recognizing me. My name is Kate Masupa. I'm from CEDA. My question really is directed to JSE Cleola. Firstly, let me, share my gratitude and thanks. I think it is your division through the acceleration solutions that you supported one of my clients, Skinny Spoo Socks, that went to the Grammy Awards because it was a partnership between ourselves and JSE. So the question, or maybe the ask I have, there's one client, Gogeto there. She has been...
Gogeto, can we see you?
Please.
Please.
So she has an opportunity to supply. She manufactures products from Moringa. She's got an opportunity to supply EUA. Yes, UAE rather. And if that is the support that you gave to Sbusiso, since you spoke of the commercialization internationally, what would be the criteria and how can she apply? And how long will it take? Because she only has got about 2 months to ensure that she supplies the platforms. I think it's 29 countries. For a woman-owned business to have supplied 29 countries.
Fantastic.
Yes, wherein we can be able maybe to partner, CEDA, like what you did for Skinny Spoo with her as well. And with Tsulu, I'll have to speak to her because they will have to speed up in terms of application if she will need funding. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that question, Kate, Ms. Masupa, because you're actually benefiting a lot more entrepreneurs in the room as well. So Koketso, hopefully you'll get your answers, but there's also an opportunity to trade here. Let's bear in mind that there is the African Continental Free Trade Area Act, which does provide opportunities for us to have coffee from Rwanda, your socks in Nigeria, Egyptian cotton that's delivered directly. The opportunities are endless, and it's not just limited to those particular supplies. There was another hand, if I'm not mistaken. Perfect. There we go.
Excuse me, please give me a minute to find my voice. My name is Vanessa, and I'm going to take longer because I have an artificial voice. I'm a cancer survivor for 3 years, 9 months. And a lot of my clients, including Yuma Sikele, Jonas Kwangwa, Sibongile Kumalo, have died during the pandemic, and it's very difficult to have had a captive business where your money came to you and you won every single award on the continent, and your president closes the borders, and 21 days later you're diagnosed with a cancer that's so rare your entire medical team had not seen it in level 5. But I'm grateful that I live in a country today where the International Women's Day is about inclusivity. There are many times that I don't want to come to these events because I don't want to legitimize it, because I'm so frustrated at government funding that goes nowhere. But in a country where media space is non-existent, and even now I have to give the mic back, how do we get those compelling stories? Because I need to rethink. You know, when you give a second chance like me, I'm understanding that there are people who have been helped in this country, but their stories need to matter. So I'm occupying a seat to start my podcast. I possibly think restart it as the first cancer patient in the world. But I've learned from the banking sector today an important principle. It's how we handle the delivery. How do we become like the Stellenbosch Mafia? How do we align ourselves? As an example, I was saying to Gugu, I'm in closed networks with darkies in tech, all black excellence, master's, PhD degrees, turned over 9 billion in the economy, all startup in VC funding.
Yep.
My daughter is a succession planning, 26 years old, taking over from me, doing a PhD. I have to mention these things, not because I'm vain, like when I spoke to the president in April. Imagine I won the president's award, and yet I don't have business access. I don't have access to markets. And there are hundreds of us who have never been funded, but who are serial job creators.
Gotcha.
And have turned over billions in the economy.
100%.
And we do not come with a bag and bowl. I don't want to find myself telling my staff to go to the United Nations websites and start extrapolating content so that my ask can be relevant. I want to be seen. And so is my final point as I launch my podcast today. Please come tell your stories, guys. Let's hear of the success. I'm grateful to your story in COVID. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love how in true entrepreneurship style, there have been many of you taking advantage of the 30 seconds to quickly punt what it is you do, right? Buy from me, this is my business. And that's what you need to do essentially as an entrepreneur to survive. But I think a wonderful conversation and combination of questions that we have. Palisa asking about partnerships, how we can establish partnerships for growth. I'm keen for one of our panelists to potentially take that one and review that. And I think it builds up very positively to what Vanessa was asking in terms of adequate partnerships to make sure that our stories are heard, but also identifying the right avenues in terms of access to financing. And Megan, I think here we can just underscore some of the themes that were highlighted earlier in terms of identifying which partners to ally with and correcting and providing a story that actually speaks to their needs. Kate also had a very important question, which I really do think speaks to access to markets, and perhaps this is also where you can touch on red tape. So this one is for you, Cleola. Maybe let's start with Kate's question and come there. I've noted your hand, ma'am. I might come to you in the interest of time, but we'll see how we balance it out after the responses from our panel. Kate's question, partnership, access to markets, how do we get it done?
Thank you very much. So we have the company that you're referring to is part of our accelerator program. They've been in business for a number of years and they want to expand into the US market. We found unique opportunities. As you can imagine, a company in retail distributing stocks doesn't really have a high marketing budget, things like that. So the whole partnership with the Grammys was an opportunity to really create a lot of brand gravitas for them, and was a unique opportunity. However, what what it's rooted in was a partnership and a collaboration we have with CEDA, where CEDA offers, and I don't know if you know this, they offer a export readiness solution, right? So the export readiness solution, basically they help companies assess whether they are export ready and then provide them with insights and information in terms of if they want to go into specific territory, what do they need to do that? However, the challenge that poses is even if a company is export ready and they do get a contract, say they go to a trade show in China and somebody says, oh, I really want what you have, it does not mean that they are able to scale to provide that solution, 100%. Right? So where we've come in and said, okay, in terms of this company, let's support them with some brand, but also support them in terms of that scaling solution. So what that fundamentally means is ramping up their manufacturing, providing funding readiness, and helping them then access that funding. Right? And in terms of then the solution that them going to the US, they now have multiple distribution opportunities with different big retailers in the US market. But it has to be a systematic process, right? So happy definitely to assess and look at the client that has to distribute. But if, for instance, and just as very quite frankly, if we do see that you cannot scale, we will then make other recommendations. And it may even be that you have to partner with other businesses, which I think is something that we need to be cognizant of, that you may be the person that has received the contract, but you may not be the person that can sustain that contract. And it's better for you to partner with other companies, with other manufacturers, so that you actually can deliver, because we've also had instances where companies haven't delivered, and that just disadvantages all of us. Right? I just want to quickly, and I know the question wasn't posed to me, to the lady who spoke about the media industry. So there's a few industries in South Africa that are struggling, right? And I'll tell you why. Sports is actually an amazing job creation industry, right? If you think of just building a stadium and sports is a business. However, the sports model for funding in South Africa is not understood. So from a funding perspective, it's very hard for funders to fund sports, because even the people in the sports, and I'm talking about the entire sports value chain, do not understand how to position the business model, and that includes media the same. So my recommendation really around certain type of industries, whether it's sports, whether it's media, maybe not so much junior mining, but even in junior mining, and then a few others, is have a look at what's happening in other spaces, other countries, in terms of how they've positioned the business model. Because there's a case to be made for the business model and how you tell your story about that return on investment. Because ultimately, anyone that's going to invest in your business wants a return. So how you start structuring your business model, how you start understanding how you're going to make money, shouldn't be wishful thinking. It should be tangible. Yep. Right? So when you want to tell a story, tell a tangible story, because ultimately you're dealing with people who look at the numbers of the story you're telling.
100%. I'm glad that you mentioned that, Cleola, because it does add a lot more context and understanding. Megan, I'm hoping that you can touch on a theme that was also mentioned in terms of partnerships, and of course, number one, how it is that we stimulate growth through partnerships, a question from Kate, and also building up on what was mentioned by Vanessa.
Thank you, Gugu, and I think it was Palesa who gave that question. Partnership is one way to obviously access capital and create additional expertise into your business. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are various forms of funding and alternatives available, and I think you have to be very, very, very cognizant of the pros and the cons of each one before you actually decide. So a partnership potentially, like Cleola had mentioned now, if you're looking to scale and you need that business to come on board with you, there could be a lot of pros for you in that. But again, you have to be cognizant that you're entering into a business agreement with another person, you're giving shares away to another person, what are their expectations, when do they need their money back, if they need their money back, are there salary requirements, are they going to draw from your business, and how involved in terms of the decision making are they going to become in your business. So there are various aspects that you have to think about when you decide on, again, entering into a partnership, but having said that, any funder that you want to join. Certain funders, like you had mentioned, had impact requirements, and reporting requirements. What are those requirements? Can you actually live up to that, and can you provide that reporting or not? So again, you have to be able to understand who it is that you're getting involved with, and does it suit you and where you are in your business.
100%. Thank you so much for that feedback. I do want us to come towards the closing remarks of the panel and perhaps leave it with both Joan and Erika to give us some feedback and sentiment. But to pick up on a theme that was mentioned, the international trade opportunities. So you're supplying 29 countries, so of course you need to make sure that the capacity is there. If not, as Cleola has mentioned, there are ways to make sure that you can get export ready or partner with some of your peers. But some of us might be sitting here thinking, whoa, that's a huge opportunity, but how do I get involved? And perhaps, Joan, this is another avenue where we can highlight trade missions. Last year we had BRICS take place here in South Africa, of course forging new opportunities with our partners within the BRICS nations and the additional countries that are on that list. The US, the EU, there are many countries that South Africa has a strong alliance and allegiance to, but especially starting here on the continent where there's this ongoing conversation about boosting trade. We hear about it in the big headlines, but how do we as entrepreneurs get in on that activity? So talk to us about participating in trade missions, identifying them, and knowing which ones to actively attend.
Yeah, a lot of my time is actually much further upstream in the sort of Africa continental free trade, actually working on some of the protocols that are there that allow an opening of space for private sector and particularly for SMEs. I mean, 80%.
So you're the right person to talk to. With all these entrepreneurs here, they need to give you more suggestions on reducing the red tape.
I'd spend a lot of time speaking with the policymakers.
Yeah.
But I think, in your jurisdiction, I think governments have different arms that are engaged with them. So if you look at your local investment promotion agencies or the chambers of commerce that are actually engaged in the AGOA mission or whatever, those are the ones that you need to start reaching out to, and they'll give you a sense of where you should be going. Because, like I said, my role is regional, so I can't give you a specific South African entry point, but I think it is critical that you do engage on this because the market is huge, and there's so much opportunity and so much potential. And I also think it's because, like I said, across Africa, not just in South Africa, some economies, 90% are SME driven, like really small scale, and there's a strong push to try and realign the sort of financial architecture to support that type of business. And the more, I think the first panel mentioned that you've got to step up and come in and talk to your policymakers and tell them that we are here and we are viable. In fact, the whole economy has been running on us. It's not just, we think big business is where the game is. It actually isn't. And that's the same right across the continent. And again, if I use the COVID example, we ended up with really tiny businesses manufacturing masks or small components of the health system, and they were critical. But how do we maintain that, and how do we stay within those value chains and make sure that we're a part of that? I think there's room for us to coalesce and come in as a body and say, look, you need to pay attention to what we need and how you should package our financing for us.
100%.
And so that it's not, I think Mambongi mentioned earlier, the banking sector has to start thinking about this and really understanding that we need small loans for short-term cash flow issues. It's not always just long-term large amounts, these sorts of things, and really being able to define those kinds of services that we need. I think, can I just respond quickly, just as a closing as well, on the point of the stories? I think crafting your story is critical, but understanding the language that people will understand or that will grab the right audience is really, really important. When we started working as UNDP in this sector, we were talking about beneficiaries and we're talking to investors, and they would look at us going, I don't care. Like, there's a development issue, go next door. Until we started talking market size. It's the same thing, just a different way of saying it. The language, you need to know the language of who you're speaking to in order to be able to grab that. We were talking, project size. For those of you in government to talk about project size, whereas they talk ticket size. Yeah.
I see.
We were, you know what I mean? It's
That's
just,
the lingo
it's
of
just
where
get the language right. And then when we changed our language, then of course, oh, we're talking about the same thing. Oh, we're aiming for the same stuff. So I think it's really, really important. And I heard them mention that, you know, it takes me too long to unpack things that are online. Yeah. It's part of the investment to get your story out there and to say it right so that people actually do pick up and actually are able to activate around your story. So I think it's really critical. Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that, Joan. Erika, I'm going to wrap it up with you on this panel discussion. I can imagine there's so much more we'd like to share, but I'm aware some time pressures.
If I may.
Sure.
On the red tape reduction, I just want to advise that there is legislative changes out now. I'm part of the steer group for the Startup Act, and we are providing commentary on that. We invite entrepreneurs to support us in terms of providing commentary. And it is critical to have your inputs and your feedback. And please, you're welcome to reach out to me or go directly to the Startup Act website. However, we do need your feedback because the changes that are made there is actually going to take us backward, if that's the right term. And we do need your support because the changes that we're driving in terms of red tape reduction is so that we can source funding for everyone in this country. It is imperative, especially in terms of exchange control, that changes for us because even if you look at in terms of Africa, we're competing for capital. Even the funders that are here today are competing for capital.
Yeah.
So please participate, please support the information and lend your voices so that we all, you know, kind of lean in and make sure that we get that over the line.
100%, and that does tie into what Tepiso had highlighted earlier in terms of some of the gaps that might occur when it comes to access to adequate funding there. How are we feeling? Okay, we're fine. All right, I'm hoping that we are, because I do want us to wrap it up on a very personal note. And as we started off the conversation using practical examples that Megan has interacted with our colleagues from Pretoria and the Peanut Butter Factory, of course making sure that there's opportunities for us to highlight the full scale of being an entrepreneur, right? It goes back to you being a human being. Once you've gotten the capital, once you've restructured and resized the business, once you've ensured that there's adequate sustainability, once you've tapped into the access to markets as well, despite the red tape or even opportunities that exist in certain policies, you do need to make sure that at the end of the day, you are building a business as an individual in partnership with others. But of course, life is life and life happens. And fundamentally, what we do need to prioritize is not only our psychological health, managing burnout, managing even constraints around frustrations that you might not be able to fully express as it comes to building and leaving a legacy. And Erika, I want to bring this back to you. In preparation for this conversation, you highlighted that number one, there's always a unique quality that women do bring to the table as entrepreneurs in terms of building the business, but also leaving a legacy. I'd like you to reflect on that, but there's also something pertinent that we witnessed this morning, is the fact that you're present here with your daughter. And you highlighted this in your opening speech this morning, again, speaking to the fact that as you build a business, it is beyond you, it is beyond your space. Ultimately, you're trying to ensure that there's a legacy that continues, that incorporates a lot more people in terms of changing their lives. I'm hoping that you can comment on those two particular points. What we need to walk away with as female entrepreneurs in the room, the quality that we bring to the table, even at the negotiation table, where things might be tough, where rejection might be there, but understanding the USP that we add, the unique value proposition, and of course, passing on to future generations and making sure that we expand the scope of our business further.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is you need to, once you've written your business in financial terms or your dream in financial terms, you need to think about it as you as a person. And I must say, through this journey, I want to encourage every woman sitting over there that you are born, you are made with innate qualities. You are born to bear children. And just your journey on bearing children should tell you how much you bring to the table. You have to be patient. You have to wait for that child for 9 months. Boy, when you bear that child, when it's born, you go into a phase where you actually have to go through a really tough time bearing this child. It is really hard. And you come to the table with a quality of endurance. You come to a table with a quality of patience, endurance. The things that make you special is that we need the men. We definitely do need the men because they come with different qualities, but you have a quality of having empathy. You need to have empathy because you know that children require empathy. You need to know that your children, when they fall and try and walk, they have to get up again. You have to be able to do that because that is part of your female makeup. So there are a lot of qualities, and I think you need to think in terms of that you bring to the table that no other human being can bring to the table, and they are directly related to the qualities in business and what you need to bring to a business. You need to grow a business. You need to have that empathy. One of the things I kind of like bring to the table that I feel my husband doesn't always bring to the table is consistency. You know, having to do the same thing over and over and over. Even if you don't like it, you need to do it. Women are born with that. It's inborn. It's second nature. You know that you have to sustain a thing, so you do the same thing over and over again. So I think in terms of that when you think of yourself as a woman. You have so much to bring to the table, so I'd like to encourage you there. In terms of sustainability and building a legacy, yes, I have...
Building the next generation.
Yeah, building the next generation. So I've always said I'm building the school for my grandchildren. I now have 3 beautiful grandchildren in our school, which I'm very proud of. Yes, and I think for them, even when I look at them, then I say, this little one is definitely going to take her grandmother's place. You know, you kind of think, this one's going to be tough enough. This little one probably will go into finances like her grandfather because she hasn't got the tenacity, possibly. Yeah, I think in terms of that. But think in terms of overcoming your fear, because somewhere inside all of us we have got that innate fear. It's all about overcoming your fear, keeping your ear on the ground and making use of opportunities. I think that's where we are.
100%. Thank you so much. And I think that really sums it up, right? As we spoke this morning, it was all about confidence, making sure that you make your presence felt. You understand your story. You structure it in such a way that it's easy for the participants that you're looking to establish a partnership with are able to understand. And that's certainly come through in many a field of the conversations and panels that we've had today. Unfortunately, we'll wrap it here for today, but I'm hoping that you've been able to absorb the nuggets and the insights that really do speak to where you are as an entrepreneur. Understand that the vision, the purpose, the business, the organization, the solution, the project, the service, the tool that you're developing is needed as long as you have identified a captive market for it. As with all things, it does need ongoing development, support, investment, and that does speak to the evolution of yourself as a leader in terms of your thinking and your skills, capacity, and technical support that might be required. It does open up more opportunities in terms of a bigger market and opportunities and spaces that you can tap into, but you can't do it alone. And in seeking the right partners, you need to make sure that you're singing from the same hymn sheet. So don't go to a bank looking for a grant. Don't go pursuing private equity if you're not willing to let go of partial ownership of your business. Understand that there's a player in the game that will meet you at your point of need. It's fundamentally how it is that you communicate and access their services and share how best it is that you want to build up on that partnership. Sustainability is key, legacies are what we're building, and most importantly, pay it forward. In your societies, in your communities, in your families, it remains critical that there are more than just a few of us who, if we look at South African statistics, we are essentially part of the top 3 of the female population in the country that are able to employ people. If you take a look at the scope of unemployment in South Africa, again, it's females who are hardest hit. So we really are in a favorable position, not only to be economically active for ourselves, but to pay it forward and propel that opportunity for so many more people. On that note, I trust that we've had fun and we've enjoyed this conversation. So to Joan, Erika, Cleola, as well as Megan, thank you so much for your contribution to this panel. As we stand up now to make our way off, of course, it wouldn't be a Business Partners event if we didn't hear from my namesake. From one Gugu to another Gugu, Gugu Mtshatu joins us now to give us the closing remarks and, of course, share some feedback after the phenomenal conversations that we've had today. Please give a warm round of applause as she makes her way up.
When we started the event today, Gugulethu said we should have fun, we should learn, and we should engage. And it would be amiss if I don't ask you if you had fun. Did you have fun? Did you learn to? Of course you engaged, because I was here. I felt the engagement. It's been an exciting event. Ladies and sunflowers in the room, when you show up for women, they show up for society. We've learned that today. As women, we've always known that. They show up for society by creating jobs, contributing to the growth of the economy, and reinvesting in their families, in their communities. For example, we know that as business partners because the 23 billion that we've invested in SMEs over the years has led to the contribution of over 700,000 jobs since 1981. It's no small feat, and a lot of those, 30 to 40% of that 23 billion has gone to women entrepreneurs, and it's something that we're proud of and something that we want to continue to improve on. If we all remember that when we show up for women, they will show up for society, we will do better. We will endeavor to fund as many women entrepreneurs as possible. Today for me, and I think for many of my colleagues, has been a clarion call to all financiers like ourselves at Business Partners, I think Tsulu as well from SIFA, and our different colleagues from banks, from the JSE. It's been a clarion call to open our pockets, our hearts to women entrepreneurs because it makes business sense. It's not just charity. It makes business sense. We've learned today from the engagements that we've had. We believe as business partners that through initiatives and platforms like this Women in Business Symposium, we can contribute towards inspiring inclusion and ramping up access to finance for women. The key is not just to make this another talk shop. The key is to learn as institutions in the room and make improvements and innovate so that we can be better. When we meet again next year, we should be better institutions for having been in this room today. I thank our keynote speaker in absentia because she's had to rush out for sharing lessons which I think apply to a lot of women entrepreneurs. We now know how to approach banks and what they look for, how to handle and approach our finances as women entrepreneurs. So we thank her for sharing those lessons with us. To our speakers and panelists, Cleola, David, Erika, Joan, Linda, Megan, Reina, Tepiso, and Tulufelo, you have been outstanding. Thank you so much. We appreciate the insights and the solutions you've put forward. As business partners, we are committed to make improvements. We are committed to take up the suggestions and see how we can improve ourselves. Because as Reina indicated earlier on, we are about empowering entrepreneurs and making sure that we have an equitable society. To you, the delegates, your robust engagement today has contributed towards making this event a resounding success that it has been. You have challenged us, I think. They have challenged us, Google. You have challenged us to use the gender lens when assessing your applications for finance, but most importantly, to view you not just as beneficiaries, Xolisa, but as partners and contributors in our society, in our country. So we thank you for that lesson. To the Business Partners team, Farron, I want to say all the names, Bongile, thank you and well done. We can't wait to experience more of these events, but most importantly, Megan, I'm sure you were listening, we can't wait to hear how many of entrepreneurs in this room you've managed to finance over the last year. It's a challenge. To you, my namesake, Gugulethu Mfuphi, the Gugulethu Mfuphi, award-winning journalist. No, she will be blushing, but she is all the woman that she thinks she is, and she's more than that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You have facilitated this session with grace and wisdom. You've pulled lessons from your own experiences, from different interviews you've done, and we really appreciate what you've done for us today, because the event, with your presence, with your support, has been the success that it has, because you are you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then as I end to the financiers in the room, it's a question to ask ourselves, and as partners in the SME ecosystem, the JSE, Abasa, SAFCA, UNDP, as we leave the room, we need to ask ourselves important questions. How are we closing the gender finding gap that exists for women entrepreneurs? Is the lens that we are using to assess applications for finance from women entrepreneurs correct? Or can we improve on the lens that we're using? And to you, the entrepreneurs in the room, we trust you've gained some tools that you can apply in your business. So as you go out and look for markets, we ask you to not forget to read those annual reports that Bongi spoke about earlier, because you need to find out how you can benefit from the 23 billion that banks procured from SMMEs last year. I'm sure it will be more this year. So how are you going to show up with more confidence when approaching financiers? How are you going to demand to be included? And as we leave the room from Erika, how are you going to build a legacy so that your business grows beyond you, but for generations to come? Thank you so much, and happy International Women's Day.